Three, two, one.
Here we go!
Welcome to the North Carolina Youth and Government YAGcast. We've got a special edition of our media podcast with another alumni spotlight interview. We're doing something new for our youth and government program. We're interviewing alumni to get a sense of what they did in the program, what they're up to today, and lessons they've learned along the way. My name is Megan Hoyt, but everyone in this program calls me Boz. And today I'm thrilled to be co-interviewing alongside Sarah Milburn, the current Youth Secretary of State. And we are so excited to be in conversation with Emma Jakob Lipscomb. Today, Emma lives in Boone, North Carolina with her family and serves as a board member for the Watauga Education Foundation. Her recent move back to North Carolina came after a long career leading youth and government programs in Washington, D.C. Emma served as the director of the DC Youth and Government Program, where she not only led the 300 delegate program, but also planned national conferences for the state directors, for youth governors, and the Y Advocacy Days Program. Emma earned her Bachelor of Arts in Political Science from UNC-Chapel Hill and her Master's of Professional Studies in Political Management at the George Washington University. Emma has worked in roles in the North Carolina Governor's Office, but she got her start in government as the 2002 Chief of Staff. She was a member of the first North Carolina delegation to attend the Conference on National Affairs. Having grown up in a small town, Emma credits youth and government with greatly expanding her worldview and teaching her about the importance of serving her community. Emma, hello, welcome. We're so
Hi.
excited to have you.
Oh, thanks. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So, one of the things we have really enjoyed hearing from alumni about is their time in the program, because we know it's changed so much over the course of this like 30 some year time that the North Carolina program's been around. So, we know you sort of ended up as the chief of staff, and we love to hear about that officer role. But just walk us through, like, what was the program like when you were in it? Tell us about what you did.
So the program was fantastic, but so different than the program that is today. So when I started, there were probably 400 or 500 kids in the program. I started in ninth grade. I was from a very small delegation. I think my first year we maybe had 5 kids. And one of the coolest things about it during my freshman year is the youth governor was actually from my delegation, which was totally surprising and amazing considering we were such a small delegation. And at that time, there were some delegations that had over 100 kids in them. So to have a youth governor from a small delegation was a huge feat for him. And also, if I remember correctly, I want to say when he ran, he might have been a delegation of one or definitely a delegation less than 5. So it really speaks to his skills as a leader to be elected governor. But to show up for your first conference and have the youth governor in your delegation was really, really spectacular. And it really shaped our love or my love for the program and wanting to continue in it. So somehow first year I also got signed up as a committee chair. I don't know how as a freshman I was a committee chair. I think it might have been at the time each delegation was required to have a committee chair, and because the youth governor was the only one who had ever done it before in our delegation, I somehow ended up as the committee chair. So there was some learning curve there showing up as a freshman, not knowing what to do and having to lead a committee. Um, so that was very exciting. I do remember my very first bill freshman year, and that was to create a North Carolina saltwater fishing license. Um, and at the time, you still were not doing a ton of research on the internet. And so I actually wrote to the North Carolina Wildlife Commission to get all the information that I needed and got a huge packet back from them that had all kinds of statistics about fish and fishing in North Carolina and water current and all that. And so I used that to write my bill. So that just goes to show you like how different it is now, I'm sure, in the bill writing process than how it was when I was in the program. So that was pretty cool. So I did it all 4 years. Sophomore year, I don't think I had an office. Junior year, I was a committee chair again and actually ran for lieutenant governor and then ended up as chief of staff my senior year, which was a really interesting behind the scenes perspective, I think, of the program as the chief of staff. And then I also was really fortunate to attend Kona for 3 years with the North Carolina delegation.
Yeah, that is so fun. I had no idea that our youth and government journeys were so parallel. Like I ran for lieutenant governor and then was the chief of staff after I lost.
Yes.
So this is this is funny, but it's a really great way, as you said, to see like behind the scenes, like what it's really like. I think
Mhm.
being an officer really gives you that, advantage kind of anyways. But one of the things we do want to ask about is that experience of actually running for office. And I mean, losing too, right? Like
Yeah.
that's a really hard thing as a, 17, 18-year-old. So what was it like to run for office and like what was the value of it, even if the ultimate outcome was not what you wanted?
So Um, it was really hard. I actually lost at the primary level, so I didn't even make it to the state level. And at the time, it was so frustrating because, like I said, our delegation was so small, and so there was this feeling of like, oh man, like because we're so small, it's really hard to run against some of these larger delegations. But I still felt like it was so important to put myself out there. I knew a lot of people having been in the program for a while, having attended Kona. I knew people from different delegations across the state. And it was something I just was really interested in doing and putting myself out there. Yes, I lost. It was really hard to lose, but at the same time, it opened me up to the opportunity of being chief of staff, which ended up being a huge blessing for me because it really helped me realize that I preferred a behind the scenes position. Like I preferred that than being upfront making speeches and all that. And it taught me how much work actually goes behind the scenes, not only to run a program, which I was able to use later as the director of the DC program, but just also even with government officials. I mean, maintaining the youth governor's schedule, lining up the bill authors to speak to him, giving him ideas and my opinions on what was going on. Like, you think it's just this one individual making all of these decisions, but really there's a whole team of people behind the scenes working to make that happen and advising him. And so that was such a cool opportunity to see. And it really helped me develop some skills that I wouldn't have had I been in a different role.
That's a great answer. So, I wanted to know if there's a special memory specifically, maybe something fun that you still remember or think about.
Oh gosh, there are so many. Youth and government was a huge part of my life. I was from a very small town. We had one high school for the entire county. And so you knew people, the same people pretty much growing up. And so youth and government was really an opportunity for me to expand my horizons, learn more about my worldview. I made some of my best friends there. But I think one of my most special memories is the first year we went to Kona, I ended up rooming with another student from Wilmington. And she and I quickly became good friends, stayed in touch all through high school, did Kona 3 years together, ended up at Carolina together, stayed friends. She was a bridesmaid in my wedding. She met my brother-in-law, and she is now my sister-in-law. So I mean, it's such a small world, and that is one of the things I love about youth and government. You never know who you're going to meet, and it is so possible to make such lasting relationships and friendships with these people. And had it not been for youth and government, I never would have met her, and who would have thought that so many years later we would have ended up sister-in-laws from our time at Coda.
That's
It
so
takes
awesome.
it takes like relationship building to like a whole new level.
Yes.
Like a lot of alums talk about their time at either youth and government, like having like friends across the entire state. I mean, it's something
Yes.
that's so cool, especially as you go into college and
Oh,
if
for
you
sure.
stick around. And yeah, I that's
Well, that
awesome. That's so
aspect
fun.
hasn't changed at all. I mean, I'm also from a small delegation, but I enjoy one of the best things is just meeting people from all around the state.
Mm.
So I
Yeah.
agree.
It's fun to hear that as much as it is different, that there are pieces of it that are just like
Oh,
quintessential.
yeah. Oh, yeah. For
Definitely.
sure.
Yeah.
I think that's what makes it such a special program.
Mm. Yeah. What was Kona like when you were a delegate? Similar? Like, was it what you know the program to be like today as well? Like the same quintessential things, or are there noticeable like differences that would like be interesting to learn about today?
Well, it was much smaller. So the final session, we all fit in, I think it was what's the main building there? Is it Washburn?
Heaton or
Heaton.
yeah,
So we all
Washburn.
fit in Heaton, and there were not nearly as many committees that went through. So it was a much smaller conference, which in some ways was really nice because you actually got to meet more people and get to know more people because you were just in the rooms for a longer period of time. Um, and so that was really cool. And it was not nearly as strategic as it is now. Like our entire delegate, and maybe it was because we were a new delegation to CODA, so we didn't know what we were doing. But like, now in plenary, you sit in quadrants so that you can all get called and all that. We sat in one row, like all together with our placards there. Like we were not trying to game the system or anything like that. And so that was really cool because we really got to know our delegation. We would argue back and forth with people and write notes and all that sort of thing. But it was such a small conference. And so I think that's really the main difference. Other than that, the bills were pretty much the same and the debating was the same and all that sort of thing. I didn't have any of the social media. None of us had cell phones. So that's all new and different. But I'd say the majority of it is the same. We all still stayed in the same lodging and that sort of thing.
Mhm. Yeah, that's super fun. Oh, I love this like trip down memory lane. This is
Yes.
this is always sort of neat just to hear what it's like and how it's changed and grown. It's like the biggest, I think, thing that people note, right? That more students are engaged and more students are involved in this, which I think is a huge positive. So let's pivot a little. Let's talk about like what you did after
Mhm.
the program and what you're doing today. So I know that you sort of recently moved back to North Carolina, but it was after a long career with youth and government programs in our state or our nation's capital, right? And the DC
Yeah.
program exists too. So I just wondered if you could talk to us a little bit about what it's like to then transition to working as a director of a program instead
Yeah,
of being a
sure.
participant. Like, what's that experience like?
Well, so before I moved to DC, we lived in Raleigh for several years. And so I worked for the state of North Carolina in the governor's office and was a press aide for the governor. Um, and so would write speeches and press releases and travel with the governor and first lady. And that was a really, really cool experience. And while I was there, I did college staff with the North Carolina program and worked part-time for the program with Lisa for a while, and did that before I moved to DC. So that was really my first introduction to the program as a program, not as a participant, but working behind the scenes on planning the conferences, reaching out to students, recruiting, all that sort of thing. And so when I got to DC, I was really eager to volunteer with their program. And so I volunteered for a year because I was still working for the state of North Carolina, and I was completely shocked because it was so different from the North Carolina program. And I think you just sort of assume like, oh, programs are the same, like they're all very similar, and that could not be further from the truth. So I was totally shocked. Um, and so after volunteering with them for a year, the position came open, and I just loved the program so much, loved youth and government, was really passionate, was ready to get out of working for the actual government and to try something new. And so I became the director of the DC program. And one of the main things that's different about the DC program is it's a city-based program rather than a state-based program. So we have a youth mayor, we have a city council, and then also that Y is one of the only Ys in the country that runs or operates in multiple jurisdictions. So the majority of our students did come from DC, but we did have a few in Northern Virginia and a couple in Maryland that came to our program. And that was just because that was where our Ys were based. Um, but that program was so different being a state-based model. I was able, because it was such a smaller area, we had a student advisory board that met in person every single week, and they would help me plan the program. And so we would do all kinds of training, all kinds of recruitment, and then they would come and meet with me, and we would talk about the local issues. And that sort of thing. And so that was such a cool opportunity to really get to know the students on a weekly basis and get their feedback and their input on how they wanted to have the program run since it was on a much smaller scale and everybody could get there. So that was really, really cool. The other thing that we got to do because it was a city-based program is we really got to interact with the city officials a lot. And so for our we'd have two conferences each year, and the first conference in the fall was sort of a prep conference, and so we would invite all of the city officials to come to that conference. And so like the chief of police would come, somebody from the Department of Education would come, and so the kids could pick which sessions they wanted to go to and engage in Q&A with these city officials about issues that they saw or questions that they had and really get some feedback. But it was such an amazing opportunity for the elected officials and the city officials to hear what the students were concerned about, what they would do differently, the issues that they were having. And it was really a conversation that they got to have. And so then they'd go back and use that information to write their bills, and we'd have our legislative weekend in the spring. Um, and usually the mayor would come and open it for us if he could. And then we just I think North Carolina still does this, but when we were done, we would send all of the bills that our youth mayor sent to the real mayor and the city council so that they would know what the students were concerned about and what they would do if they were actually elected officials in DC. And so it was a really neat opportunity to get to know and get to work with the city officials on, some of these issues and have our students engaged with them directly, which was a cool opportunity.
That's awesome. I can tell that it definitely impacted you for your life so far.
Oh yeah.
So as a senior in high school, like most of us are finishing out high school, we know that YAG impacted you throughout your life, but specifically, how did it impact you within those next 4 years, such as college or the bridge between jobs and school and that kind of thing?
So it definitely directed my degree. I have a political science degree, and so it really confirmed that I wanted to work in government in some way. And so I went into college knowing that I was going to major in political science. I was pretty sure I didn't want to go the law school route, and that I actually wanted to work in government in some way. In what capacity, I wasn't sure. But anyway, so it definitely directed my degree. And in fact, I got to the senior year and they were like, if you take any more political science classes, these will now not count to graduation. So like you need to take classes outside poli sci. And I was like, oh no. So I graduated early. I was like, this is what I love. This is what I want to do. I would encourage y'all to take more classes outside of your major than I did, but at the time it was just my passion and my interest. And so that's what I ended up doing. It also really kind of guided some internships that I did. So I interned with MSNBC um, because I thought for a while I might want to do political journalism. And for a while, I had a second major in journalism and thought that that might be the route that I wanted to go. After that internship, I decided not to. But again, I was still sort of thinking, what are some other areas of politics? And because of my experience as chief of staff, what are some behind the scenes jobs I could have in politics? Like I don't want to run for office. Um, and then later I interned in the policy office for the governor. And so that was another opportunity like, oh, am I interested in legislation? Do I want to do that? And so that's sort of how I ended up then with the job that I had as a press aide after college. And so I would definitely say all of that in youth and government was so heavily influenced because I just don't think I would have known that those careers existed had I not participated in the program. Like coming from a small town, I didn't know anybody who worked in government. Other than like lawyers, doctors, businessmen, like I just didn't see that in my world. And so youth and government really showed me that there were other jobs out there. There were other ways to get involved, other ways to participate. And then I cannot state how important relationships are. And I think youth and government does such an important job of teaching that. And it wasn't just that, like, really good friends of mine from youth and government went to Carolina and we stayed really good friends. But it was also, it taught me, like, okay, when I am doing these internships, how do I present myself? One, how do I dress? Like, what is professional attire? How do I introduce myself? How do I speak to other people? How do I express my ideas, both in writing and orally? And so, like, all of those skills really, really helped me as I moved forward, and kind of guided those decisions, after college. So I think you're learning a tremendous amount of skills in the program and building all kinds of relationships that you hopefully will be able to keep for a really long time, and to be able to use really no matter what job you go forward. I mean, youth and government will prepare you for any job. You don't have to go work in government. Um, and I think that's one of the cool things about it is it's the skills like relationship building that you need to use in any sort of career moving forward.
Yeah, I just really appreciate what you shared about the self-awareness you had around knowing you didn't want to go to law school, because I think that's a very kind of stereotypical or like very,
Mhm.
like just known career. Like, oh, we know attorneys, right? And we know if we're interested in the government or law or, legislation, that feels like a natural first step. But it really sounds like, yeah, it just broadened your horizons a lot. And you could really see careers that you didn't know, as you said,
Yeah.
existed. And just the transferable nature too of skills, like from youth and government to literally any field.
Oh yeah,
And
definitely.
that's the sort of fun part about all these alumni interviews is folks are not working necessarily as elected officials, or
No,
in
very few of
government.
us. Very few of us are.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So are there, I don't know, just like if folks did want to sort of do that career exploration and they sort of are thinking of like, how do I find out about jobs that I don't know exist? Like, what advice would you give students who are sort of kind of trying to figure that out, whether they're in high school or whether they're in college, really trying to take that first step into the world of work?
I would highly, highly encourage everybody to find somewhere to volunteer or to do an internship, whether it be in high school or college. Our high school had an opportunity where you could do an internship for credit, and I interned with an attorney, and I was like, this is the most boring thing I've ever done. Like, I definitely do not want to do this. Um, And all of them I did for free. And most of them I was working nights to pay for an apartment so that I could do a free internship during the day. And so I think you need to have that willingness to figure out like how I can make this work. Because it's not easy to have a unpaid job. And so like, yeah, you might have to figure out what's that job I can do at nights or on the weekends in order to be able to do this, but it taught me so much. And like, I mean, like I said, prior to going to MSNBC, I thought I was going to do political journalism. I had a journalism degree. I was taking all the classes. I was like, I love this, and at the time, West Wing was huge. And I was like, oh, CJ Craig, this is what I'm going to do. Press secretary, like, I'm all in. And then after getting there, I was like, oh, this is not hands-on enough for me. Like, I want to be behind the scenes, but I'm really reporting on what's already been done. I'm not getting to influence or participate in the way that I want to participate. But had I not done that internship, I never would have known that. I would have thought, like, this is the angle that I want to be in and the job that I want to go to, and I want to be reporting on this stuff. And so I think youth in government is amazing because I think within the program itself, you can try things out. You can be a lobbyist one year. You can be in the journalism part one year. You can try and write a bill. And there were people in the program when I was in it that did all of that instead of trying to like rise the ranks within the legislative system or the press system. They would try different things. And so I would encourage that. But I just think you cannot underestimate volunteering and part-time jobs and internships because I don't think that you can really get the experience that you need to one, take to another job, but really to understand what that job actually is. And yeah, sure, there is a lot of grunt work sometimes in that, and there's a lot of paper pushing, and maybe you're not doing exactly what it is, but there are so many opportunities to talk to people in that career when you're in an internship. And that's the other thing I would say is please do informational interviews. Reach out to people that are in these jobs, ask them to have coffee, ask them to have dinner with you, and get a feel for what kind of education did they have? What jobs did they do before they're doing what they're doing now? Because gathering all of that information is just going to help you make a more informed decision. And then also, you're not going to get it right the first time. You may start down a career path that you think you're going to love and find out, this is really not for me. I didn't go to graduate school right after college. I took a couple years, I worked, and then I went back to graduate school and did graduate school at night. Once I figured out, like, this is the graduate school I want to go to, this is the program that I'm interested in. So don't feel like you have to know that right away, even after 4 years of college. Like, take some time, get some job experience, make sure this is what you want to do. And I had friends that did that as well. My sister-in-law, in fact, did end up going to law school, but not right after college. She took several years, worked in the judicial system, made sure it was what she wanted to do, figured out what kind of law she liked, and then went back to law school. So you have plenty of time. Like, what you think you might want to be now might not ultimately be what it is that you want to be. And that is okay. Like, there is so much pressure. I felt so much pressure in college to know what I wanted to do. That's why I took the classes that I did, because I was like, I've got to be able to get this job right after school. And you don't have to know that right away. You do definitely have plenty of time to try some things out and see what you like before making a decision.
That's like the best college application process, college is coming up advice I have heard yet.
Oh, well,
Seriously.
thank you.
Yeah.
You do have plenty of time. You do not have to know. And honestly, like, it's also okay if your major does not align. Like, having looked at different resumes when people have applied for jobs, like, your major does not have to align. People's skills are huge. Like, can you write? Can you formulate sentences when you're talking to me? Can you explain why you're passionate about stuff? Like, it's okay. Like, if you majored in biology and now you want to do nothing with biology, like, you've got time to figure it out. And there's just not a straight path for anybody. There are very few people, I think, who like know exactly what they want to be and go major in that and then come out and do it for the rest of their lives. Like, there are lots of people that take different tangents to figure out what it is they want to do.
I love that. I feel like we're all like breathing a collective sigh of relief, you know?
I'm still trying to figure out. I'm like, what's my next
Exactly.
act now that I'm here in
Yes.
Boone? So,
Yeah. I
you got
mean, I
time.
sort of love that. We all are trying to figure out what we want to be when we grow up,
Yeah.
even when we're grown up,
Yes.
in air quotes for sure. This is this is some really good, thoughtful advice, and I think it's gonna just be a balm, and it has been, I felt like, to Sarah here for lots of other students as well. Um, but I am curious too, as we think about other lessons that you've learned just throughout your life, not just from youth and government. But one of the things we're really enjoying asking alums about is this idea of failure, because I think it's something that as a society we don't really talk about as much as maybe we should, but also for high school and college students who are in the youth and government program, right? We know they're really high achieving, maybe have some perfectionist tendencies, right? We know just the college process in general is very high pressured. Um, and failure can feel really defeating, really hard. And so I just want to ask, like, is there an experience of failure that you've had where, like, something didn't go your way, or it didn't work out the way you wanted to in youth and government or in life, that has stuck with you, like whether there were lessons you learned from that experience that you'd be willing to share, or just what that experience taught you.
Yeah, like I mean, I can think of all different ways that I have failed or things didn't work out the way that I thought they had or would, that, like I really worked really hard to make them happen and they didn't happen. And it does. It feels crushing and it feels so defeating because you worked so hard on it and you think, best laid plans and it doesn't work out. And I think honestly, I would say like you just got to keep going. And I don't mean that in like, oh, something better is going to come along. I mean, maybe right away it won't. And I think you do have to take the time to like recognize that failure and grieve that failure and feel those feelings, because even if in 10 years you're like, oh, that really worked out for the best. Like, just like I said, losing, the lieutenant governor race, it did work out for the best of me, but it didn't feel that way at the time. It was mortifying to put myself out there and to lose that race and to be defeated. And if I remember correctly, the other candidate didn't even say their name and they still beat me. And so I'm like, it was mortifying and embarrassing. And there are all kinds of things like that. And so I think it's okay to not see right now, like, oh, maybe this worked out for the best and maybe it didn't. But that hindsight's 2020. But I think if you can keep moving forward, and I think if you can not give up on yourself and keep trying and look for other avenues. Like if one internship tells you no, well, call somebody else and see if they'll get you in. And try again. Like I think there is so much about putting one foot forward and putting your head down and putting in the work and trying to keep moving forward, even when it feels really, really hard. And the other thing I think, especially in the age of social media, that you have to remember is like you are comparing your real, horrible, wonderful, good, bad, sad, happy life to someone's highlight reel. Like it may look like somebody else isn't failing or making mistakes, but everybody is failing and everybody is making mistakes. And it is so hard to remember that when it looks like somebody else has it together or somebody else got it on the first try. And there are so few people that get it the first time and get it on the first try that you really do just have to keep trying. And like as cliche as that sounds, like that really has been what has worked for me is look for a different avenue, look for a different door, look for somebody else to help. Surround yourself with good people who are going to support you and help you during those times of failure and going to encourage you and be sad with you and then help you get up the next day and try again. Like, and I think that is also so huge is to find your people because your people will help you through those failures.
That's awesome. That's very good advice. I think all of us need to hear over and over again, just as humans.
Yeah.
So we have a couple fun, quick wrap-up questions I wanted to ask you. So the first one is this or that, which is we love to do this in YAG now,
Okay.
maybe we do. Friday Fun Night / Saturday Night Live or Governor's Gala.
So I was trying to remember what we did. I feel like it was Saturday Night Live at the time. And I think our Saturday Night Live was basically like a teen night at the Y. It was not nearly the fun things that y'all do now and the themed things and all of that. Um, but definitely I would say Saturday Night Live because by then you've gotten to know people. It's an opportunity to get to engage with people in a social way. And it was always so much fun to just hang out and decompress and take a deep breath after 3 hard days of work and get ready for the final day to find out, the results of elections and whose bill passed and all that. So Saturday Night Live was always really fun.
Awesome. So what is your favorite or most impactful book that you've read?
So for me, I think right now it's actually a children's book. It's Harold and the Purple Crayon. It has been my favorite book for a long time. I've actually used it at officers training when I was the DC director. But for those of you who might not know the story, it's about a little boy who gets up in the middle of the night with a purple crayon and he draws these amazing adventures for himself. But along the way, even though he's in control of the crayon, he finds himself in trouble and he has to think about how he can get out of that trouble. He gets lost and he has to draw a police officer to ask questions for. It's also, and eventually he finds his way home. But it's my daughter's favorite book right now, so we read it a lot at bedtime. But it's such a good reminder that we are each in control of our own story and we each have our own crayon that we're drawing the adventures of our life. But that does not mean that we're not going to find ourselves in trouble. It does not mean that we aren't going to have to get ourselves out of that trouble, that we aren't sometimes going to have to ask for help from other people. And at the end, if we keep going, we will find our path and we will find our journey and our adventure. And I think it's just such a simple children's book, but it's such a huge lesson and story and reminder. And it gives me both hope for the journey that I'm on and also a good reminder that there are going to be bumps along the road. And that's just life. I mean, that's just normal. We have to keep, you know, taking the turns and finding our adventure.
Okay, I have one more.
Okay.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Oh, um, this is a tough one. I think I would be a swim coach. I think if I was not in the nonprofit and government world, I would have coached swimming.
Okay, I like that. Well, on behalf of me, I want to say thank you so much for your time. It was lovely getting to talk to you, getting to know you, and hear some valuable life lessons.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. Youth and government has been a love of mine for a very long time. So I am happy to participate this, and I really appreciate being asked.
Yeah, Emma, thanks for this. So I am so thrilled that we had this time together after having spent many a summer on the mountain
Yes.
at Kona together to actually have this dedicated time to just like learn more about your journey.
Oh,
And I
thanks.
just really appreciate the really good wisdom that you've shared. And I know a lot of our students will appreciate that too. So thank you.
Well, yep. Thanks for having me.